US President Donald Trump has said that he's aware of the conspiracy theories circulating around the sudden death of his ally, Senator Lindsey Graham, but declared that the FBI was wasting time investigating the matter.
For years, Donald Trump and Lindsey Graham's friendship puzzled even their closest allies. But after Graham's sudden death, Trump's deeply emotional words reignited questions few expected. Was he simply mourning a trusted friend? Or was he revealing the untold story behind one of Washington's most unlikely political alliances? As tributes poured in and speculation spread, many wondered whether Graham's greatest influence had always remained hidden from public view. So, what truth did Trump want America to remember before it was too late? The call changed everything forever. Only hours before the nation was stunned by heartbreaking news, Donald Trump answered what seemed like another routine phone call from Senator Lindsey Graham. Nothing about the conversation suggested it would become their last. Graham had just returned from a demanding trip to Ukraine, and although he admitted he felt tired after the long journey, his attention remained fixed on work. Rather than discussing his health, he focused on the Save America Act, determined to keep pushing the legislation forward despite the exhausting travel. Trump later recalled that Graham sounded exactly like the tireless senator he had known for years, committed, energetic, and fully engaged in the issues that mattered most to him. There was no warning that history was quietly unfolding through an ordinary exchange between two longtime political allies. Only a short time later, everything changed. Trump received word that Graham had died following a sudden illness, leaving him shocked by how quickly the situation had unfolded. Reflecting on the loss, he described Graham as being like a member of his own family, a statement that revealed a level of personal closeness many people may not have fully understood. That reaction immediately raised questions about the remarkable relationship the two men had built over the years. Their connection had not always looked this way. Graham had once been one of Trump's strongest Republican critics during the 2016 presidential campaign, creating a rivalry that seemed unlikely ever to become a friendship. Yet, politics has often produced unexpected alliances, and over time, mutual respect gradually replaced public disagreement. Trump later described Graham as someone who evolved from a formidable political opponent into one of his most trusted confidants. That transformation gave new meaning to Trump's emotional recollections after Graham's passing. Some observers viewed his comments simply as heartfelt grief for a close friend. Others wondered whether they revealed something deeper about the senator's influence behind closed doors. Trump repeatedly emphasized Graham's loyalty, relentless work ethic, and determination to keep serving even after returning from an exhausting international trip. Those details painted the picture of a man who remained focused on public service until his final hours, rather than someone preparing for the end. As tributes began arriving from political leaders across Washington, the final phone call took on greater significance. It became more than a personal memory. It became the opening chapter in understanding why Lindsey Graham's absence would leave a lasting mark on both Donald Trump and American politics, while raising difficult questions about the extraordinary partnership that few outside their closest circle fully appreciated. Once fierce rivals, Trump and Graham built a partnership few saw coming. But what changed behind the scenes? How did bitter clashes become political trust? And what hidden turning point transformed their relationship? Could this alliance reveal the secret behind their unexpected rise together now? Let's unravel the mystery. Rivals forged unbreakable political trust. Long before Donald Trump spoke with visible emotion about Lindsey Graham's passing, the two men stood on opposite sides of one of the Republican Party's fiercest political battles. During the 2015 and 2016 presidential campaign, Graham openly criticized Trump's rise, while Trump answered with sharp public attacks of his own. Few observers believed those clashes would ever give way to genuine respect. At the time, their disagreements seemed too deep, their political styles too different, and their rivalry too public to overcome. Yet Washington has often produced unexpected partnerships, and this became one of its most remarkable examples. As Trump's influence within the Republican Party grew, Graham gradually shifted from outspoken critic to dependable supporter. Their conversations became more frequent, their political goals increasingly aligned, and mutual trust slowly replaced open confrontation. Trump eventually endorsed Graham's re-election campaign early, signaling confidence in a senator who had once challenged him. That decision reflected more than political strategy. It suggested a relationship built over years of shared experiences, difficult negotiations, and growing personal respect. Trump later described Graham as someone who understood both the Senate and the people inside it better than almost anyone else. According to Trump's recollections, Graham possessed a rare ability to communicate with Republicans and Democrats alike, often finding common ground where others saw only division. That reputation was echoed by colleagues from both parties after his death, many of whom remembered him as someone willing to negotiate despite major ideological disagreements. Such praise offered another perspective on why Trump reacted so emotionally when reflecting on their friendship. His words suggested he believed Graham's greatest value was not simply his loyalty, but his ability to bring people together during difficult political moments. Some viewed Trump's heartfelt tribute as the natural response of a longtime friend grieving an unexpected loss. Others interpreted it as recognition that Graham had quietly become one of the most influential figures behind the scenes of modern Republican politics. Neither interpretation changes the documented facts, yet both highlight how dramatically public perception had shifted since their earliest confrontations. What began as an intense rivalry had evolved into one of Trump's closest political relationships, surprising allies and critics alike. Looking back, their journey revealed that political disagreements do not always define lasting partnerships. Instead, shared goals, repeated cooperation, and earned respect can reshape even the strongest divisions. Graham's transformation from determined opponent to trusted advisor became more than a personal story. It became an important piece of understanding why Trump's emotional reflections carried such weight, and why their unlikely alliance continues raising questions about the enduring influence Graham held until his final days. Behind the headlines, Graham's true power remained hidden where few were watching. What made Trump trust him during critical battles? And what secret influence shaped the choices ahead? Why does the next revelation challenge everything people assumed about his legacy and impact in Washington? Keep watching. Influence beyond public political battles. As Donald Trump reflected on Lindsey Graham's life, his words gradually shifted away from personal loss and towards something he believed many Americans had overlooked for years. He did not focus on hidden scandals or dramatic revelations. Instead, he repeatedly returned to Graham's remarkable ability to accomplish difficult political tasks that few others could manage. To Trump, that was the real story. Behind the headlines and public speeches stood a senator whose greatest influence was often exercised quietly through conversations, negotiations, and relationships built over decades. That perspective invited a different way of understanding Graham's place in Washington. Throughout his Senate career, Graham earned a reputation as someone who could navigate some of the most challenging political situations. Even when debates became deeply divided, he maintained working relationships across party lines. Trump praised him as a politician who understood how to bring opposing sides together whenever a difficult issue threatened to stall. He described Graham as someone who could reach people others could not, solving problems through persistence, experience, and personal trust rather than public confrontation alone. That ability became one of the qualities Trump admired most. During major legislative battles, Graham was frequently involved in conversations that shaped important decisions, even when his role remained largely outside public attention. His influence extended beyond domestic politics into national security and foreign affairs, where he became known as a leading voice on issues involving Ukraine, Israel, Iran, and America's broader strategic interests. Colleagues often relied on Graham for guidance during international crises, and his years of experience helped him navigate both policy debates and political negotiations. Trump later recalled Graham returning exhausted from a trip to Ukraine, but refusing to slow down. Instead of resting, Graham immediately focused on advancing the Save America Act. Even after extensive travel, his commitment to his work in Washington remained unwavering, leaving a lasting impression on those around him. Some observers interpreted those repeated stories as evidence that Trump wanted the public to recognize Graham's dedication rather than simply mourn his passing. Others believed they revealed how much of Graham's influence had remained hidden behind private meetings and personal relationships, instead of public recognition. Neither conclusion changes the documented facts, but both suggest there was more to Graham's legacy than many people realized during his lifetime. As those reflections continued, one idea became increasingly difficult to ignore. Lindsey Graham's greatest political achievements may not have been the speeches everyone remembered, but the quiet influence that continued shaping decisions long after the cameras stopped recording. Across party lines, Graham's final legacy sparked unexpected praise. But what truly made rivals honor him? Could his quiet alliances reveal a different side of Washington? And what hidden impact will his absence leave behind as the Senate moves forward into an uncertain new era? Stay glued. Respect reached across political divides. As news of Lindsey Graham's sudden death spread across Washington, the reaction quickly became larger than one political party or one personal friendship. Donald Trump's emotional tribute had already captured national attention, but what followed revealed another side of Graham's legacy that few expected to see so clearly. Leaders who had spent years arguing against his policies paused their disagreements to recognize the man they had known behind closed doors. Their responses suggested that Graham's influence extended far beyond campaign speeches, television appearances, or partisan debates. It was a reminder that political relationships are often far more complicated than the public ever realizes. Democratic and Republican senators alike described Graham as someone willing to sit down, listen, and search for practical solutions even when deep ideological differences remained. Senator Amy Klobuchar remembered his enthusiasm for public service and recalled traveling overseas with him, saying his excitement for representing the country never seemed to fade. Senator Cory Booker expressed genuine shock at the loss and reflected on their unexpected friendship, pointing to their cooperation on criminal justice reform that helped lead to the First Step Act. Senator Elizabeth Warren, despite years of policy disagreements, remembered Graham as someone who always approached negotiations with humor and respect. Senator Adam Schiff acknowledged Graham's strong support for Ukraine and his willingness to reach across the aisle, while Senator Mark Warner praised his dedication to national security and his commitment to serving the country. Together, those tributes painted a picture that differed from the fierce political image often seen in public. They revealed a senator who could fiercely defend his beliefs while maintaining productive relationships with those who strongly disagreed with him. Graham's work stretched across issues that shaped American policy for years, including support for Ukraine, Israel, Iran, Iraq, military affairs, and efforts to help Afghan refugees. Even critics acknowledged Graham's determination to remain involved in difficult issues rather than avoiding political risk. His willingness to negotiate may explain why so many lawmakers responded with genuine sadness. Many believed he had a rare ability to keep personal relationships separate from political disagreements. Whether through public leadership or private negotiations, His influence was widely recognized, making his absence immediately felt throughout the Senate. As voices from every corner of Washington continued honoring his life, one conclusion became increasingly difficult to dismiss. Lindsey Graham's legacy could not be measured only by legislation or elections. It was equally defined by the trust he earned from allies and opponents alike, leaving behind relationships that continued speaking for him after his voice had fallen silent. Graham's absence triggers a deeper political uncertainty, but what hidden battles could emerge from his vacant Senate seat? Who will step forward to reshape South Carolina's future? And could this transition change Washington's balance of power in ways no one expects to see? Let's find out. America faces an uncertain tomorrow. As tributes continued pouring in from across the country, it became increasingly clear that Lindsey Graham's passing was more than the loss of a longtime senator. It marked the sudden absence of a political figure whose influence had stretched far beyond South Carolina. Donald Trump's emotional response reflected the pain of losing a trusted friend. But official actions taken in the hours that followed showed that the impact reached every level of government. The sense of loss quickly evolved into a broader conversation about what Graham had left behind and who, if anyone, could fill the space he occupied. One of the most visible signs of that national response came when Trump ordered American flags to be lowered to half-staff through July 18th. The gesture honored what he described as the remarkable life and achievements of Graham, whom he publicly called a dear friend and a truly great man. Across Washington, the lowered flags served as a quiet reminder that Graham's career had touched far more than partisan politics. For supporters, the order reflected genuine respect for a man who had remained deeply involved in public service until his final day. At the same time, attention quickly turned toward the practical consequences of his sudden passing. South Carolina now faced the difficult responsibility of replacing one of its longest-serving senators, at least temporarily, while preparing for a future election that would determine who would complete the remainder of his term. The vacancy immediately raised questions about leadership, continuity, and the future direction of the Senate. Graham had spent decades building relationships, shaping debates, and influencing major decisions. Replacing a Senate seat would be possible, but replacing the experience and connections he had accumulated over so many years appeared far more complicated. Some observers focused on the political implications, wondering how his absence might affect upcoming legislative priorities and the balance within the Republican Party. Others looked beyond party strategy and argued that the greatest loss involved the disappearance of a lawmaker who could still communicate across political divides when negotiations became difficult. Those differing perspectives reflected the unusual position Graham occupied in Washington. He remained a committed conservative, while also maintaining working relationships with colleagues who often opposed him. That combination made his absence feel larger than a single political vacancy. As the country continued honoring his memory, the conversation gradually shifted from mourning the man to measuring the lasting impact of his career. Trump's emotional tribute had opened the story, but the nationwide response revealed something even larger. Lindsey Graham's passing left unanswered questions not only about who would succeed him, but also about whether anyone could quietly build the same influence, trust, and bipartisan relationships that had defined so much of his public life for decades. Graham's true impact remains a mystery waiting to unfold. Was his greatest victory politics, or the relationships he built? Could history reveal a deeper legacy than anyone expected? What final truth will define Graham's name forever when the world remembers his remarkable journey? Stay glued. History remembers more than victories. As the first wave of grief began giving way to reflection, Donald Trump's memories of Lindsey Graham started carrying a different kind of meaning. His emotional words no longer sounded like the immediate reaction to shocking news alone. Instead, they became part of a larger conversation about how one senator's career would ultimately be remembered. Again and again, Trump returned to the same themes. He insisted that Graham loved public service, believed deeply in his work, and remained fully committed until the very end. Those repeated observations suggested that Graham's greatest story was not simply how he died, but how completely he dedicated his life to serving in the United States Senate. Trump also expressed a belief that many people would appreciate Graham even more after his passing than they had while he was alive. That statement invited a closer look at the defining moments that shaped Graham's reputation. Among them, Trump repeatedly highlighted Graham's passionate defense of Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh during the confirmation hearings. He described that speech as one of the most memorable moments in Senate history, believing it helped change the course of the confirmation process. Whether others shared that opinion or not, there was little doubt that Graham's forceful defense became one of the most recognized episodes of his long political career. Yet Trump suggested that even those highly visible moments told only part of the story. He continued describing Graham as someone who genuinely loved being a politician, not because of power or recognition, but because he believed deeply in public service. That commitment appeared evident even during their final conversation. After returning from a demanding trip to Ukraine, Graham did not focus on rest or personal concerns. Instead, he immediately discussed the Save America Act and the work he still hoped to accomplish. Looking back, that ordinary exchange became extraordinary because neither man realized it would be their last conversation. In hindsight, every detail seemed to carry greater emotional weight than it had only hours earlier. Some people viewed Trump's heartfelt recollections simply as the natural grief of losing a trusted friend and longtime political ally. Others believed they revealed how much Graham's influence had quietly shaped important decisions over the years. Neither perspective changes the documented facts, but both point toward a larger truth about his legacy. The influence of a public servant is often measured not only by speeches, votes, or headlines, but also by the trust earned over decades of service. As the story reached its closing moments, one question remained impossible to ignore. Would Lindsey Graham ultimately be remembered most for the legislation he supported, or for the lasting relationships, quiet influence, and unwavering dedication that continued shaping American politics long after his final phone call ended? So, what do you think? Did Donald Trump's emotional tribute reveal Lindsey Graham's true legacy, or is there more behind their extraordinary bond? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.